In this tutorial, we'll look at testing more than one condition using the enhanced if-else-if statement so that I can test multiple items within my GUI. So I have two text boxes here. This is our inventory. And we're going to test to make sure that I don't put in a negative number for cartons, but also not put in a negative number for items. And so when we go into the code, again, this was in my button click event like we had in the other example. And so we're going to test to see if, okay, and we're testing the txt carton box text element. We're testing to see if the value of that box is less than 0. Okay, if it's less than 0, then what we're going to do is we are going to, again, throw an error to the user. Okay, so we're going to let the LBL total result .text equal, and we're going to put in our error message. Okay. From there, then, that only tested the one box. So we want to test the other box. So else if, so we're going to test another box, and we're going to test to see, and so this test belongs on the same line. Does the VAL of the txt item, so we're looking at that one, is that one less than 0? And then if it is, we want LBL total result dot text also to equal an error message. Now, if you recall from our last example with the if else, we knew that if we kept this LBL total result where it's at, I'm going to get an error message, but it's still going to go ahead and it's going to do the outcome. And so we don't want that. So we only want one of three possibilities. Either I'm going to get an error message for the carton box, an error message for the item box, or it's going to calculate the math for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in an else, and I'm going to move this line of code, this math, up into the else statement. So now what's going to happen, I like a little spacing in mine to read it. Let's look at the logic. If the txt carton box is less than 0, then it prints an error. If it's not less than 0, what it's going to do, it's going to test to see, oh, well, is the other one less than 0? And if that one's less than 0, it's going to give us an error. If that's not the case, it's going to then do the math. So an if, else, if, else statement, they are dependent tests so that only one outcome will actually occur, very much like the if, else statement that we had before. If this was true, it did this, otherwise it did the other thing. Okay, so this one, and I can have as many else ifs as I want. We only have 2 boxes to test. If I was using this to assign a grade, a letter grade, we do have 5 letter grades, so I might have 5 else if statements so that I can assign an appropriate letter grade. But it's only going to choose one of the 3 possible outcomes because I've made them dependent on each other using an if, else structure. Had I done just 3 ifs, if this is true, if this is true, if this is true, then they become independent of each other and it's going to test all of them. In an else if, an if, else if, it only tests one of them. So let's see what happens. So as I execute this one, let's say I put in a 7 and I put in a 5. We know that that will give us 35. I could change that first one to a -7. So I'm going to try to calculate it, and my box isn't large enough, but we can see that the error message would have appeared. So I'm going to put a positive number in there. I'm going to make this guy a negative number, try to calculate. So I'm still getting an error message. If I make him positive, so it only chose one of those outcomes. So this one was a successful run. So again, if I would have made them separate ifs, then that would have been, all three of them would have actually executed. But when I create this if else if structure, they're each dependent on each other.